Hi, I'm Pastor David Lai, and today I'm going to talk to you about Dorje's Incarnation Lineage. And before we go into the actual Incarnation Lineage, I thought it would be very useful for you to know the purpose of knowing about Dorje's Incarnation Lineage. And the first thing that you should know is that Dorje actually arose from a highest incarnation line of enlightened masters in Tibet and India that is equivalent to the Dalai Lama and the Panchen Lamas. And in that way, it is these stories that I'm going to tell to you will hopefully give you, or rather inspire you with faith in Dorje as a very powerful and beneficial protector of the Dharma. And the stories I'm going to tell to you is based on the writings of Khepche Pabongka Rinpoche, Khepche Song Rinpoche, Khepche Chejang Rinpoche. And just a rundown of the incarnations, Dorje emanated from Manjushri, from the Mahasiddha Biwapa, Tomi Sambota, the Tibetan king Trisong Detsen, the Indian Mahasiddha Naropa, the translator or Lotsawa, Loden Sherab, ILotsawa, Buton Rinchen Drub, Sakya Pandita, Duldzin Drakpa Gyaltsen, Panchen Sonan Drapa, and Tulku Drapa Gyaltsen. Dorje arose from the Bodhisattva Manjushri. The Bodhisattva Manjushri in Buddhism is actually considered to be the embodiment of all the Buddha's transcendent wisdom. He was one of the 8 disciples, Bodhisattva disciples of the historical Buddha, Shakyamuni. And Manjushri, at that time of the Buddha, often asked the relevant questions so that the Buddha would be able to answer them, and it created a cause for him to give certain teachings. Because in Buddhism, it is believed that for every teaching, a cause must be created for the teaching to arise. So the Buddha would sometimes recommend that some of his own faithful disciples to go to Manjushri because of their affinity, their strong affinity with him. And in China, there is the 5 peaks of Manjushri called Wu Tai San, and that is believed to be the earthly abode of Manjushri. And in our prayers to Dorje Shugden, we also invoke him from Wu Tai San, or 5 peaks of Manjushri. And iconographically, Manjushri is usually depicted holding a flaming wisdom sword, and sometimes he's also seen riding a lion. This is very similar to Dorje Shugden's iconography as well. So one of the earlier incarnations of Dorje Shugden is the Mahasiddha Virupa. A Mahasiddha is actually, literally just means great attainments. And Virupa was actually, at the beginning of his life, the first part of his life, he was a great scholar at Nalanda Monastery. And Nalanda Monastery was one of the most prestigious monastic institutions of ancient India. By day, he was a teacher to many monks, students, and by night he would engage in many of his tantric practices, and his main practice at that time was the Heruka Tantras. And because of, he practiced to the point where he gained high spiritual realizations, and when he engaged in his tantric rituals or his choke offerings in his room, dakinis or celestial beings would, from the Mandala of Heruka, would appear to Virupa. And often the monks would see this and they thought it was ordinary women entering into his room. So that's why Virupa, or his other name, Biwapa, which means bad boy, was considered to have broken his vows, and they expelled him from the monastery because they actually thought that he was consorting with ordinary women. So henceforth, after that, the Mahasiddha Virupa roamed the countryside as a wandering yogin. And during that time, he engaged in his meditations in cemeteries, and he taught to lay people, to ordinary folks. And he created many miracles, and many people gained a lot of faith in him. And among all of his disciples, he had Mahasiddha Krishnapada and Dombi Heruka. Dombi Heruka is actually Lama Tsongkhapa's previous incarnation. Of course, there are many stories of Biwapa engaging in miracles, but one of the most famous is when he came to this ancient kingdom in India, and he entered into a tavern, and he started drinking, and he started drinking, and drinking, and drinking. And the bartender at that time was a little worried because he was worried that he wouldn't be able to pay for his drinks. So what happened was Biwapa told him, I'll pay, he dropped his mug, and he said that I'll pay you when the sun sets. And before his next drink, he lifted his hand and he, in this mudra, towards the sun. And before you know it, what happened was the sun wouldn't move. For 3 days and 3 nights, the sun stayed in midday. So there was chaos in the kingdom, and everybody was very worried. And they pleaded to the king because the crops were dying and people were very tired because it was constant daylight. So what happened was the king, along with his subjects, pleaded with Virupa to please release the sun. And when that happens, he did that. He released the sun. Actually, it was not that he stopped the sun. It was just a miracle that he created from his realization. And out of all this, the king became his disciple and gained a lot of faith in the Dharma. At that time in ancient India, it was very common for many of the Buddhist masters to display miracle powers because it was very easy for people to gain faith in the Dharma, in the teachings based on miracle powers. But later on, as you see in the later incarnations, they displayed other manifestations instead of miraculous powers. Dorje Shugden in his next incarnation arose as Tibetan this time, and he was known as the father of the Tibetan language. So as a young man, he was a bright student, and he was noticed by the emperor Dzongchen Gampo. In that way, he was handpicked by the emperor to be part of a group of young men that the emperor sent to India in order to research and to create a new script for the Tibetan language. At that time in Tibet, they did not have a written language, and that's why that was the purpose of this group. So this young man traveled all the way, can you imagine, to South India from Tibet, and that's 2 different countries and thousands of miles, and 2 different weathers completely. In Tibet, it was cold, it was in the mountains, and in India, it was tropical, it was hot. So they had a lot of difficulties. And in order to travel, and finally when they reached to South India, they had to start studying. And while they were in India, in South India, the Tibetans studied the Indian language, Sanskrit, the grammar, poetry, the literature, and all the topics that was relevant to the formation of this new language, new written language. So after many years of study, Padmasambhava returned to Tibet, and in Tibet, he was the only one who survived the trip. And when he arrived in Tibet, it was said that the king, along with his entourage, greeted him, and there was a huge ceremony where Padmasambhava actually presented the Sanskrit language to the emperor at that time. The emperor himself instructed Padmasambhava to create this new script based on the Indian language that they have studied. So after Padmasambhava had created the script, which was based on the Devanagari and Kashmiri scripts, he presented to the emperor. And along the way, he composed 6 texts on Tibetan grammar, which is largely based on the Sanskrit equivalent. The emperor also took time away for 4 years to learn this new language, new written language, and the grammar. And after mastering the language, the emperor actually composed 21 tantric texts on Avalokiteshvara or Chenrezig, Kuan Yin. He passed on into legend as the father and creator of the Tibetan script. After Padmasambhava, Dorje Shugden arose as the Tibetan king Trisong Detsen, and he's one of the 3 great Dharma kings of ancient Tibet and the main disciple of Guru Rinchen when he first arrived in Tibet. King Trisong Detsen was probably one of the most important Dharma kings of Tibet because he had to do a lot of work to undo the damages done by the previous king who was anti-Buddhist and revive the Buddhist teachings in Tibet at that time. King Trisong Detsen sent a lot of emissaries to China, to Nepal, and to India requesting the help of great masters. And specifically to India, he actually invited the great Indian master Shantarakshita to come to Tibet. And when this great Indian master arrived in Tibet, he started teaching, and this Indian master was a great pure monk, and he gave a lot of great teachings, but the local people believe in the local customs and the local religion, and there was a lot of obstacles, and a lot of the shamans and the local religious people retaliated by sending spirits and black magic towards Shantarakshita, which created a lot of obstacles. So realizing that all these obstacles were supernatural, he told the emperor, this great Indian master, Shantarakshita, told the emperor to please invite Guru Padmasambhava because of his ability, of his tantric ability to subdue these supernatural problems. And hence, emissaries were sent to India to the great master, Guru Padmasambhava, and the great Indian master traveled up north from India, and along the way he did a lot of retreats in caves that are today great pilgrimage sites. When Guru Rinchen arrived in Tibet, he did not start teaching. He engaged in spiritual war with these supernatural problems. And together with King Trisong Detsen, they established the first Buddhist monastery in Tibet called Samye. And with the help of masters like Shantarakshita and Guru Rinchen, they started a whole monastic tradition and created the Sangha. Hence, King Trisong Detsen also supervised, along with these great Indian masters, the first generation of Tibetan monks, and also a whole project of translations of Buddhist scriptures into Tibetan. King Trisong Detsen was one of the 3 great Dharma kings was because of his great work of re-establishing Buddhism in Tibet. And it was a whole lifetime together with masters like Guru Rinchen and Shantarakshita and later Kamalashila as well. After the king Trisong Detsen, Dorje arose as the famous Mahasiddha Naropa. Naropa was an Indian Mahasiddha that was extremely famous to this day for his intense Guru devotion. He was actually born of high status in a Brahmin family in Bengal, and from a very young age, he succumbed to his parents' wishes and he agreed to marry a young Brahmin girl. But after 8 years of marriage, they both agreed to dissolve their marriage in order to pursue their spiritual aspirations of becoming ordained. When Naropa turned 28, he entered into the famous Buddhist monastic institution, Nalanda, where he engaged in the study and practice of Sutra and Tantra. In the monastery itself, he gained a reputation of a great scholar and irrefutable, faultless debater. And that way, he rose the ranks in the monastery and he became one of the guardians of the Northern Gate. And this is a title given to great scholars, some of the greatest scholars in Nalanda, where he was given the key to the gate, and that is a great honor in ancient India. In that process, Naropa gave a lot of teachings and he had a lot of students in the monastery. And his knowledge and wisdom surpassed all the other scholars at that time. However, Naropa's departure from the monastery was spurred by this chance meeting with an old hag. At that time, Naropa was just outside of his room, he was reading. And an old hag appeared to him and asked him, does he know what he's reading? And Naropa said that he does, and he went on to explain all that he knew. And with that, the old hag laugh hysterically with a lot of joy. And then the next thing, the old hag asked him if he understood the meaning of what he read. And Naropa paused, and he thought about it, and he realized that he did not realize the inner meaning of the Buddha's teachings. And the old hag, knowing what Naropa was thinking, wept and cried hysterically. So in the end, the old hag actually told Naropa that it is time that you seek out this enlightened master, Tilopa, this great Mahasiddha Tilopa. And upon hearing this name of this great master, Tilopa, great faith arose within Naropa. And he decided there and then that he would actually have to leave the monastery in order to seek out his guru. And that went on for many years in search of this great master, Tilopa. And when Naropa met Tilopa, Tilopa did not recognize Naropa to be his student, and instead subjected him to 12 major and 12 minor trials where Naropa had to carry out certain instructions from his guru, and in order to break his ego, in order to train his mind, in order for him to realize the teachings. With all the wrathful and peaceful means in which the guru taught his student Naropa, a lot of karma have been purified, and Naropa gained quite high realizations. Throughout all these hardships that Naropa went through, he did not develop any wrong views, any doubts, not even one time did he decided that he wanted to leave or quit. And instead, he diligently obeyed all the instructions and commands of his guru. And that's why Naropa is famous to this day as a prime example of guru devotion. And with that, Tilopa bestowed upon Naropa many teachings and higher tantric initiations, including Vajrayogini. And he was sent to meditate in the caves. And it was said that because of his guru devotion, Naropa just had to meditate for a very short time, and he was able to gain visions of the deities, and in particular Vajrayogini in the form of Vajrayogini. At that stage, Naropa reached the same realizations and attainments as his guru, and Tilopa was said to have assured him that they were inseparable. They were inseparable in this lifetime and also in many lifetimes before this, and also in the future. Hence, many of the lineages that came through Naropa, such as the 6 yogas of Naropa and Vajrayogini, had become very popular and very effective for the practitioners to gain high realizations. After the Mahasiddha Naropa, Dorje arose as the Tibetan translator Loden Sherab, and he was one of the most renowned translators who went through a lot of hardships to bring the Dharma texts from India to Tibet and translate them as well. For the first earlier part of his life, Loden Sherab was actually tutored by his uncle, ILotsawa Lekpa Sherab, who had been one of the 3 famous disciples of the Indian master Atisha Dipamkara. And it was said that after many years of study and of travel into India and back to Tibet, Loden Sherab was said to have translated over the course of his lifetime of more than 137,000 verses. But more importantly, he was actually more famous for his writings, his commentaries on philosophy, on logic, on yogic practices. And he amassed a lot of students. And it was said that at the pinnacle of Loden Sherab's teaching career, up to 20,000 people would come to him to receive teachings. And he would need 2,000 assistants in order to teach this huge crowd. And it was said that from Bodh Gaya, when Loden Sherab was there in India, he brought back the Dharma protector Satrap. It was said that Loden Sherab at that time requested the abbot of Bodh Gaya for a Dharma protector. And the abbot at that time, through his clairvoyance, saw that there was a need for this, and he requested, there was a whole pantheon of Dharma protectors in India at that time, and he made requests to all these Dharma protectors, and it was Satrap that manifested and answered his prayers. And hence, Loden Sherab brought the protector Satrap back into Tibet. Along the way, along his journey back to Tibet, Lord Satrap actually emanated as a servant to assist the Lama. And on one occasion, Loden Sherab actually dropped his mala in a latrine and asked this assistant, which is an emanation of Satrap, to pick it up. And when the assistant attempted to do so, Loden Sherab actually held onto this assistant and demanded that he would be the protector of the Dharma. And the assistant agreed. And then there was another story that Loden Sherab was actually crossing a river. And what happened was, he asked the assistant to carry him across the river. And while he was doing that, Loden Sherab was pressing the assistant down into the river. But the assistant had the strength to lift the Lama up. And this was interpreted to mean that the Lama, who was one with the meditation deity, was equal to the assistant, which is Satrap. And that shows the enlightened ability of Satrap and his massive potential to benefit others as well. Back in Tibet, Lama Loden Sherab actually installed the protector Satrap as the protector of the monastery and of the whole Sangha at Sangpu. And on one occasion, Satrap actually manifested displeasure and unhappiness as Tibet was barren, and it was very different from India, where India was lush and green. So Lama Loden Sherab actually pulled out some of his hair and threw it into the air. And from his hair manifested a whole huge forest, green and lush. And with this forest, he offered it to Satrap on behalf of the Tibetans. This was interpreted to mean that Lama Loden Sherab created an offering for Satrap to remain and to manifest as a Dharma protector, because merits are needed for enlightened Dharma protectors to manifest their enlightened activities. So in this way, you can see that Satrap and Loden Sherab had a very close connection, which will manifest later again in Dorjeshin's later incarnations. Later on, Satrap is depicted as being part of Dorje Shugden's mandala on the first floor above Dorje Shugden himself, because Satrap is actually the older Dharma protector in this case. After Lama Loden Sherab, Dorje Shugden arose as the prolific scholar Buton Rinchen Drub. And this great scholar was born in Western Tibet in the area where Tashi Lumpo Monastery, the Panchen Lamas Monastery, would later be built. After completing his studies, the young promising student Buton Rinchen Drub began to translate many Sanskrit texts, and he had to correct many of the existing translations because of a better understanding of the language. According to his disciple Rinchen Namgyal, which is also his biographer, Buton Rinchen Drub gave many teachings and writings which was directed towards correcting the misunderstandings of the Buddha's teachings at that time. During his lifetime, Buton Rinchen Drub was actually most famous for having embarked on a very ambitious project of compiling all of the Buddha's teachings into two collections, the Kangyo and the Tangyo. The Kangyo is the spoken words of the Buddha, which is the exact words that the Buddha spoke and written in sutras. And the Tangyo is actually commentaries and later texts of other Buddhist masters after the Buddha's lifetime. And these two collections, the Kangyo and the Tangyo, have survived time and is in use up to this day. On top of that, Buton Rinchen Drub was a prolific writer, and he wrote up to 28 volumes of writings and commentaries on the Buddha's teachings. And as early as 1917, during the period of the 13th Dalai Lama, instructions were given to carve out all of Buton Rinchen Drub's writings in all 28 volumes. That shows the amazing contribution of Buton Rinchen Drub towards the preservation and propagation of the Buddhist teachings in Tibet at that time. After Buton Rinchen Drub, Dorje Shugden arose as the Tibetan scholar by the name of Sakya Pandita. Sakya Pandita was a famous lineage holder of the Sakya school of Tibet. He studied under Jetsun Drapa Gyaltsen, which is one of the foremost masters of the Sakya school at that time. And he mastered all of the teachings of both Sutra and Tantra. At that time, Sakya Pandita specialized in valid cognition or logic, and he composed his commentary in order to correct the current misunderstanding and misconceptions that had arisen during that time, that period, among the scholars. And as he grew up, as he matured, Sakya Pandita became a very great scholar and an unrivaled debater. He was said to have been challenged by many scholars and debaters, and including 6 Hindu scholars, and a very famous Indian Hindu scholar by the name of Harinanda. And in debate, he was able to refute and defend the Buddha's teachings. From then on, Sakya Pandita's fame grew like wildfire all over the Tibetan and Indian world. And his name was heard all the way up to China, where at that time, China was ruled by the Mongol ruler Gaden Khan. And upon hearing his name, great faith arose in this Mongolian emperor, and he sent emissaries to Tibet to invite Sakya Pandita to come to China to teach. And when Sakya Pandita did make the journey all the way to China, the emperor sought to test out whether his faith was true or not in this great master, whether he was really a great master. So what he did was he got his court magicians, shamans actually, to conjure up a monastery from their miraculous powers, and he requested Sakya Pandita to consecrate this monastery, this temple actually. So Sakya Pandita actually entered into the temple, and he requested for flowers and water, and he did his rituals to bless the temple. At that time, the king was actually quite disappointed, and he told his magicians to withdraw their illusion. But the magicians couldn't do it. They found that the temple had solidified to become real. And with that, the emperor, Gaden Khan, became really embarrassed, and he supplicated and he knelt down before Sakya Pandita, pleading forgiveness and confessed of his intent of testing out Sakya Pandita. Sakya Pandita was full of compassion and forgave Gaden Khan of his lack of faith. And ever since that time, the emperor took refuge in Sakya Pandita and sought a lot of teachings from this great master. This temple stands to this day and is known as Emanation Temple in China. And eventually, Sakya Pandita passed into clear light, and he left behind many students in China. And this solidified the connection Dorje Shugden had with the Sakya tradition that would manifest later when he arose as a Dharma protector. After the lifetime of Sakya Pandita, Dorje Shugden arose as Duldzin Drapa Gyaltsen, who is one of the Lama Tsongkhapa's foremost disciples. Duldzin is actually not his name, it's actually a title given to him, and it's actually a contraction of the word Dulwa Zinpa, which means holder of the Vinaya. And this reflects his pure ability to hold onto his vows, and that made him such a pure monk. It was believed that Duldzin Drapa Gyaltsen and Lama Tsongkhapa was equal in terms of their realizations, in terms of their wisdom, in terms of their ability and skillful means to teach. It was said that Duldzin Drapa Gyaltsen and Lama Tsongkhapa were very close for many lifetimes. And hence, Duldzin Drapa Gyaltsen actually oversaw the construction of Gaden Monastery that was meant to be offered to Lama Tsongkhapa in his old age. When Lama Tsongkhapa was very old, it was not possible for him to travel to distant places to give teachings, and so Duldzin Drakpa Gyaltsen, out of great compassion for his guru, embarked on this project to build Nalanda Monastery, and he offered it up to Lama Tsongkhapa. Duldzin Drakpa Gyaltsen was also one of the most, in fact, highly respected among all of Lama Tsongkhapa's students, and hence, after Lama Tsongkhapa's passing, he was actually the first to be requested to be the Gaden Tripa, which is the representative of Lama Tsongkhapa on earth, or rather the heir to the throne of Lama Tsongkhapa. However, Duldzin Drakpa Gyaltsen, out of great humility, declined the honor and offered it up to Gyaltsab, another great master as well. It was with this commitment and devotion that Duldzin made the first promise, actually, during the lifetime of Lama Tsongkhapa, when Lama Tsongkhapa was giving teachings. There was a lot of people who came for Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings, and it was said that not just human disciples, it was said that dharma protectors and ethereal beings would come to receive teachings from Lama Tsongkhapa as well. And at that time, the dharma protector Nechung appeared in the form of a dove and circled the teaching hall. Some of them, and many of them, were highly attained and was able to perceive that the dove was actually this dharma protector Nechung. But they kept quiet. And after the teachings, it was Duldzin who actually spoke up and requested to speak to Nechung, and the bird descended and appeared as a boy dressed in white, and he addressed Nechung and asked him why had he come to disturb his lama's teachings. And Nechung replied that he was listening to the teachings, and he found the teachings of Lama Tsongkhapa, especially on the middle way view of Nagarjuna, to be superior, and that he would like to see that these teachings prevail over time, and there was a special need for a protector for his teachings, and that he himself was unable to rise to that occasion to be the protector of Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings because of his previous vows that he swore before Guru Rinpoche. So Guru Nechung actually requested Duldzin Drakpa Gyaltsen, will you be the protector of the middle way view of Nagarjuna as taught by Lama Tsongkhapa? And immediately Duldzin Drakpa Gyaltsen folded his hands and said, yes, I will. With that, it was said that Duldzin Drakpa Gyaltsen created a cause for him to arise as a Dharma protector in a later incarnation. Panchen Sonam Drapa's guru was Gendun Gyatso, which is also the second Dalai Lama, and which is incredible because later on, Panchen Sonam Drapa became the guru to the third Dalai Lama, Sonam Gyatso. And in his lifetime, Panchen Sonam Drapa was an incredible writer and scholar, and he composed 6 volumes of commentaries on various topics, and these texts were used until this day in the Gelug monasteries as textbooks to study in order to become a geshe. And this shows that the clarity of his teachings, especially of what he wrote, made it easy for people to understand many of the more difficult and subtler aspects of the Buddhist teachings. So in that lifetime, Panchen Sonam Drapa had the Dalai Lama, the third Dalai Lama, as his student. He had the 21st Gaden Tripa Gelek Pelsang and the 25th Gaden Tripa Peljo Gyatso. In that lifetime, he had many, many illustrious students, and that reflect highly upon him as a great scholar. Several incarnations after Panchen Sonam Drapa, Dorje Shugden arose as the great master Tulku Drapa Gyaltsen. This would be his last lifetime before he arose as the Dharma protector Dorje Shugden. When he was a young boy, Tulku Drapa Gyaltsen displayed many miraculous signs of a high incarnate Lama, and he was considered to be one of the candidates, the incarnation of the 4th Dalai Lama. However, Ngawang Losang Gyatso was eventually identified and enthroned as the 5th Dalai Lama by the Panchen Lama Choki Gyaltsen. Simultaneously, Panchen Lama Choki Gyaltsen also enthroned him as the incarnation of Panchen Sonam Drapa, and in that lifetime he was named Tulku Drapa Gyaltsen. As a young student of Panchen Losang Choki Gyaltsen, he manifested many great deeds of a high incarnate Lama, and he excelled in his studies and his practices. By 18, he had already meditated in hundreds of caves, and he was known to be a great meditator at such a young age. And some of his students at that time said that he could perceive the Buddhas directly. Even at that time, Tulku Gyaltsen was already a great recluse, and he would often shun crowds who often came to make offerings to him. In Tibet at that time, people often make offerings to meditators and yogis and masters in order to collect merit and in order to get a blessing. And so what happened was Tulku Gyaltsen had to travel to one cave to another in order to avoid the crowd. This shows that Tulku Gyaltsen was not interested in fame, and he was even more revered because of that by many, many people. And he had many sponsors and patrons from Tibet all the way to Mongolia and even China. And in that lifetime, he was said to be extraordinarily intelligent and scholarly with his knowledge, and he was adept with his rituals, and many people flocked to him for teachings. And because of that, he became extremely famous, and his fame was said to have outshined the fifth Dalai Lama at that time, who was maturing into a great Lama himself. And there was this rivalry going on between them. So what happened was, on one occasion during Losar, which is the Tibetan New Year, and traditionally during that period, what happened was the oracle, Nechung, would take trance, and he would give pronouncements and bless the public. High Lamas and many monks would also come to greet the oracle as well. So on one occasion, Tulku Gyaltsen actually went up to Nechung and in order to greet the Dharma protector, and what happened was Nechung actually told him that, "Do you remember your promise you made?" And Tulku Gyaltsen said, "No, I don't." So immediately what the oracle did was he took some rice, he blew into it and gave it to Tulku Gyaltsen, and he told him to eat it and enter into a retreat. And Tulku Gyaltsen followed that instruction and entered into a retreat. After that, what happened was he remembered his promise in the previous life, and he actually sought out the oracle, and Nechung took trance in the oracle and he spoke to him. Tulku Gyaltsen said that he remembers his promise, but there was a problem. The problem was that he did not have the anger that was necessary to arise as a Dharma protector. It was said that Dharma protectors would arise from Vajra anger, or anger manifested out of great compassion for others. So Nechung replied to Tulku Gyaltsen and said that, "You do not have to worry about this, I will create the causes for you." So right after that, rumors was spreading all over about Tulku Gyaltsen's fame eclipsing the Dalai Lama. It was said that even during the Monlam festivities, the students of Tulku Gyaltsen happened to make the throne slightly higher than the Dalai Lama's. That fanned the jealousy even more. So what happened was there was a plot to get rid of Tulku Gyaltsen, and this was done in secret without the fifth Dalai Lama's knowledge. So in order to do that, they realized that they had to assassinate, or rather to kill, Tulku Gyaltsen. And they made plans to seek audience with Tulku Gyaltsen, and they came to Tulku Gyaltsen's ladrang. What happened was, in the ladrang, they, as per tradition of meeting a high Lama, they would present offerings and a kata, etc., to the Lama. And when they did that, they took out a knife, a dagger, and they tried to stab Tulku Gyaltsen, but to no avail. It was said that for each stab, an eye would appear out of the hole where he was stabbed. And they tried to poison him. They realized that they could not kill Tulku Gyaltsen. And so in the end, Tulku Gyaltsen himself had to tell his assailants, out of great compassion, because he realized his time has come, and he told them that he could only be killed by strangulation. So immediately his assailants took a kata and he strangled the Lama, Tulku Drub Gyaltsen, and he passed away. At the moment of his passing, it was said that Tulku Drub Gyaltsen meditated on compassion and he remembered his promise. Combined with his prayers, he arose as Dorje Shugden. In conclusion, you can see that Dorje arose from one of the highest incarnation lines of Tibet. He had many lifetimes of great lamas, and he played the role of guru and disciple to the Dalai Lama and Panchen lamas. These are some of the incredible contributions Dorje had made for the flourishing of the Buddha Dharma in many of his lifetimes as Sakya Pandita, one of the lineage holders of the Sakya school, as the Mahasiddha, the Indian Mahasiddha Naropa, who was later considered to be one of the earlier lineage holders of the Kagyu school and of Duldzin Drub Gyaltsen, Panchen Sonan Drakpa, Tulku Drub Gyaltsen. These are incarnations of the Gelug school. So Dorje manifests in all these different traditions in order to preserve and propagate the Buddha Dharma for future lifetimes. Through his many incarnations, you can see that Dorje Shugden is an emanation of Manjushri and had arisen as an enlightened Dharma protector based on his promise to Nechung that he made during his lifetime as Duldzin Drub Gyaltsen in order to protect Lama Tsongkhapa's special view of Nagarjuna. Hence, you can have great confidence in Dorje as a powerful and effective Dharma protector to protect you and your Dharma practice.